Hi, this is Rod Saunders from Jew and Greek. On Monday, a 16-year-old Swedish girl named Greta Thunberg lectured global leaders at the UN on the issue of climate change.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you!
Now, I don't like to get into politics too much because it's such a volatile arena. And besides, it's not really what I do. But in this case, I'm going to make an exception because the issue here isn't so much a political issue, but an ethical issue. You see, Greta comes from a family of actors, singers, and environmental activists, and has been diagnosed with several disorders, including Asperger's. You can see her acting chops on display in that brief speech, but you can't see all of the other factors that contributed to her performance. I have long opposed the exploitation of children in the political arena. In my opinion, if a person wants to enter the public discussion, they should be prepared to have their views questioned. But who wants to challenge the views of a child? You can't win. You can only come out looking like a villain. But if you don't question them, you end up looking like you agree with whatever they're saying. It's just a bad idea all around. As far as I'm concerned, until you're old enough to vote and have worked a job, paid taxes, and either put a roof over your head or contributed to your family's expenses, I don't really want to know what you think about how the world works, because you don't have enough life experience to have a valid opinion. You might be able to tell me about video games and social media, but until you've been slapped around a bit by life, been lied to, mistreated, dealt with government regulations, and awakened to the fact that you've been wrong about some things, you really don't know much about life. When you're young and idealistic, you see the world differently. You see all of these rich people and all of these poor people, and you think, why don't we just take money from the rich and give it to the poor? That way everybody will have something. But it's been tried before, and it doesn't work. It's called redistribution of the wealth, and it's the basic tenet of socialism, which is consistently met with failure. How are you going to take the money from the rich? You going to do it at gunpoint? I don't think so. You have to do it through legislating a higher top marginal tax rate. So what will the rich do when you try to take their money? They'll set up some kind of a tax shelter. You see, rich people have attorneys and accountants who they pay to help them keep their money, and they're very good at what they do. So good luck with that. But let's say that you do manage to bump the tax rate up and confiscate some of the wealth of the wealthy. Now they have less capital, and a capitalist system like ours requires capital. So people with less money spend less money, which means that they're purchasing fewer goods, which means that fewer goods are in demand, which means that fewer goods will be produced, which means that fewer employees are needed, which means that fewer people will have jobs, which means that fewer people will be paying taxes, which means that the government has less money to give to the poor, which defeats the whole purpose for raising taxes on the wealthy in the first place. You see, economics is complicated, and so is predicting the weather. When I was young, I had a Datsun station wagon that I used to deliver the Dallas Morning News to locations around town in my hometown of Wichita Falls, Texas. One night, while I was driving my route, I was listening to Larry King on the radio. Back then, he had a nationwide talk show that was very popular. And this particular night, he was talking to some people who were trapped in a high school gymnasium in Buffalo because a severe blizzard struck the area during a basketball game and the roads weren't passable. They couldn't get out. That same winter, I ended up getting stuck in the ice and snow while delivering the papers in the middle of the night due to a winter storm that hit my area. For those of you up north, who deal with snow every year, it's different where I'm from. We don't use snow tires because most of the winter there's no snow on the ground. And we don't usually get the streets cleared very well when it does snow. They usually only clear the major streets, and everything else is pretty much a roll of the dice. So anyway, this was long before cell phones, so I ended up locking my car and walking home. My dad helped me finish my route and get my car home later. It was just a brutal winter all across the country, and the next year was more of the same. People were asking what was going on with the weather, and some scientists explained that the planet was cooling down and we were entering a new ice age. I kid you not. Over the years, we've heard countless alarms from the global warming climate change crowd about impending disaster. In 1989, a UN environmental official said entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend isn't reversed by the year 2000. In 1995, there was a movie starring Kevin Costner called Waterworld, about the world that would be left after the polar ice caps melt. Well, here we are nearly 25 years later, and the ice caps are still intact, and we're still walking around on dry land. Now, I'm not saying there's no cause for concern about the environment or pollution, but one advantage you have in getting older is that you've lived through a few of these doomsday predictions, and you've learned not to panic every time somebody sounds an alarm. People lie. Scientists make mistakes. Politicians overreact and demagogue the issues. That's the world we live in, and kids just don't have enough experience yet to realize that. But that's not just the case with economics and the environment. It's also the case in the church with moral issues like abortion. There's a Calvinist church in Tempe, Arizona, that has become very active on this issue. Here's the pastor, Jeff Durbin, appearing before the city council to shame them for not enforcing the old abortion laws that were in effect prior to the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision.
Roe versus Wade is not a law. The Supreme Court of the United States has not been given the duty or power of legislation according to our union's founding documents. It is a fundamentally flawed and errant court opinion, decades old without proper scientific, logical, or legal basis.
He kind of looks like John Calvin, doesn't he? Now, I'm fine with the pastor taking an active role in this issue if that's what he feels God wants him to do. But it didn't end there. The church also put young people before the council to discuss the matter. Here's an 11-year-old girl addressing the council.
Do whatever is needed to ensure that Arizona State Law 13-3603 is enforced. Make Phoenix a sanctuary city for the unborn in order to follow the will of God.
And a 10-year-old girl.
I asked my dad, as I studied, I wondered why coral, manatees, sea turtles, and even puppies and kittens had protection under our law, but a human being inside their mother's womb does not.
And a 10-year-old boy.
People have made very creative and honestly silly arguments in order to make us feel better about cutting the heads off of human beings while safely in their mother's bellies. People are saying that it is okay to murder a baby in the womb because it is very small and not fully developed.
And a 9-year-old boy.
I can't survive without my mom and dad. I need their money. I need their help. I need them to give me food and shelter. I need their love, or I would die. Would any of you feel comfortable in allowing a doctor to rip off my legs or inject me with poison right here and right now?
Now, I'm all for ending abortion, but this issue is far too complicated for any of these kids to grasp. First of all, if the city starts enforcing these old laws again, they will likely be sued for violating the ruling of the Supreme Court. Not only that, but they will also have to determine what penalties to impose on the women who get an abortion. Do you treat them as murderers and impose the death penalty after 46 years of no legal consequences for terminating a pregnancy? I don't think that's really politically feasible in this day. But I could be wrong. In all likelihood, the courts will step in and order the city to abide by Roe v. Wade pending a new ruling, which is probably what the activists want, because they now have a theoretical majority on the Supreme Court. But as we've seen in the past, these judges don't always rule as we think they will. But let's just speculate that Roe v. Wade is overturned. That still doesn't end abortion. That just kicks the issue back to the states. And after 46 years of Roe v. Wade being viewed as the law of the land, there's probably only 10 or 12 states that would try to outlaw abortion. That would just force women who want an abortion to drive to a neighboring state for the procedure, which would amount to a minor expense and inconvenience more than anything else. The only ways to end abortion in the United States are to pass a constitutional amendment protecting the lives of the unborn, which is very unlikely given the difficulty in amending the Constitution. Or you could overthrow the government and write a new constitution, which is even less likely. Or you could change the culture so that people don't want to have abortions anymore. Of the three options, this seems the most consistent with the Great Commission, as challenging as it may be. Now, I don't want to get into a debate with anybody on all of this because, as I said, it's a volatile issue. My point is that even adults don't always grasp the complexity of these hot-button issues, so why would we expect children to? And if they can't, should we be parading them out to these public forums to voice an opinion that they really can't articulately present and defend? And this is not just a problem in the political world. It's also an issue in the ministry. Through the years, many children have been encouraged to take to the pulpit and preach the gospel, even though most kids couldn't give you a clear explanation of what the gospel is. A lot of adults seem to have trouble doing that.
One's final destiny, then, is not determined by what you say. It is determined by what you do. It is not about profession. It is about obedience.
Here's a clip of Marjo Gortner, a child evangelist back in the 1950s who was pushed out into the ministry by his parents.
Calling Christian mothers that pointed me to Jesus. If we had more good Christian mothers that would teach the boys and girls how to pray more instead of drinking cocktails and smoking filthy old cigarettes, we would have a better America, better men and women, and not so much juvenile delinquency.
As an adult, he admitted that the whole thing was a scam for money, and now he's an agnostic. When I was attending Rhema back in the early 1980s, my Sunday school class invited a teenage boy to speak. He had written a book about this trip to heaven that he had, and was being invited to speak at lots of churches from the time he was 13. After he spoke, the couple who hosted the class were talking about him and asked my opinion. I told them that I don't believe in child preachers. They were startled at my response, and they asked me why. I explained to them what the Bible says about the qualifications for ministry listed in 1 Timothy chapter 3, and a child can't meet those qualifications. The woman didn't say much, but the man said, "Oh yeah, I see your point." As an adult, that guy became a popular speaker, but he eventually ended up in a scandal that derailed his ministry. I can't help but wonder how things might have turned out for him if he hadn't been thrust into the limelight as a child before he had the chance to develop his character and maturity. I believe that God can use kids in many ways, in music, in witnessing, or in any number of ways in the ministry of helps, but they don't belong in leadership positions. The human brain isn't even fully developed until the mid-20s. Kids need time to grow, intellectually and spiritually. They need time to experience life before they formulate their views and promote those views. To push them out onto the world stage before they're ready does them no good. It might make other people feel good for the moment, but the effects on the child can be devastating. And as Jesus said, you'd be better off with a millstone strung around your neck and thrown into the sea than to cause a child to stumble. So what do you guys think? Am I way off base here? Or are we seeing children exploited far too often these days? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.